Last lesson, we played a game called Petals of the Rose to see if we could find a pattern or some kind of rule that went with numbers that we saw. And so here we're diving into a new unit called recursion, and it's all about finding patterns and how we're going to actually display those patterns in a formula. So let's take a look at the term that we're going to be using when we have a pattern of numbers, and that's going to be a sequence. A sequence is an ordered list of numbers. Okay, typically these numbers are also related by a rule. So I'm going to put that in there just so that we remember. It's an ordered list of numbers that are related by a rule. Okay, so let's see what we mean by finding the pattern. So we're going to look at this first one, and we're going to see what happens from when I get from 6 to 3, and from 3 to 0, and from 0 to -3, and -3 to -6, because we have to find the next three terms. All right, let's take a look. If I go from 6 to 3, I'm subtracting 3. If I go 3 to 0, I'm also subtracting 3. If I go from 0 to -3, also subtracting 3. And then from -3 to -6, I'm subtracting 3. So this is a very predictable pattern that we can see. So if I want to get the next three terms, I'm going to take -6 and subtract 3, and that gives me -9. I'm going to take that -9, subtract 3, and I get -12. Then I'm going to take that -12, subtract 3, and I get -15. So that's how I go about finding that pattern. Sometimes the patterns are not all that easy to determine. And creating the formulas of some of the wonky ones are a little bit difficult, but we're gonna make it through it. On this next one, I have 4, 16, 36, 64, and 100. At first I thought to get from 4 to 6, I multiply 4 by itself, but when I go to the next one, it doesn't do that. Like 16 squared is not 36. Even 16 added together to itself is not correct, but that wouldn't be the same as 4 plus 4 equals 8. Okay, so let me do this. I'm going to find the difference between all of them and see if I can see a pattern. So from 4 to 16, I have a difference of 12. Okay, so I added 12. To get from 16 to 36, I added 20. To get from 36 to 64, I added 28. To get from 64 to 100, I added 36. All right, so I'm looking initially, I see that they're all even, and I'm starting to see a pattern here, right? This is almost like a secondary. I take 12 to get from 12 to 20, I added 8. To get from 20 to 28, I added 8. To get from 28 to 36, I added 8. So to get the next three terms, what I need to do is make my difference 8 additional spots. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that 100. Let me put that in red here. I'm going to take that 100. 36 plus 8 gives me 44. So I'm going to add 44 to 100. So I should have 144. That's my next term. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in fact, I'll put that 144 in blue just so that we keep it separate. So 144. And then 44 plus 8 is going to be plus 52. Plus 52? Yeah. So if I take 144 and I add 52 to it, that's 196. So 196. And then the third one, let's see here, I'm going to add 8 to that 52. So that would be plus 60. So I'm going to take 196 and I'm going to add 60 to it. So that would be 200 minus 4, 260 minus 4. That's going to be 256. And you can use your calculator to put all these together, right? So this was weird. I noticed that there was a pattern of it increasing, so I kind of had to do like a second level to determine what was happening here. This is probably one of the more complicated ones, right? But it's a pattern nonetheless, and we were able to figure out what the next ones were. Let's see if this one's any better. Okay, so we have -1, 2, 7, 14, 23. Okay, let's just explore and see what we've got here. So from -1 to 2, I have plus 3. From 2 to 7, I have plus 5. From 7 to 14, I have plus 7. From 14 to 23, I have plus 9. Okay, so I see a pattern, right? So each time we're increasing the difference by 2. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and draw out, I'm going to increase by 11, and then increase by 13, and then increase by 15. Okay, so now that I've got my structure in, all I have to do is figure out those numbers. So 23 plus 11 is going to be 34. Oops, let me put that in blue here. So I have 34, and that 34 plus 13 gives me 47. And then I take that 47 plus 15, and that gives me, let's see here, 3, 4, 2, that would be 62. So the next three in my sequence are 34, 47, and 62. I wrote these kind of small, but you can see these are the next ones in my sequence. So all we did is we just looked for a pattern between them. Okay, let's put it into a problem-solving piece here. Example 2, Mary Ann opened a savings account at her local savings bank. She initially deposited $75. That's what this is right here. Here's $75. Mary Ann decides to deposit $10 in her savings account each week. How much money does Mary Ann have in her account after 6 weeks? Okay, so what we're doing is we're saying we're taking that 75 and we're going to add 10. So 75 plus 10 gives me 85. So it told us the pattern and we're to actually create the numbers for it. Take that 85, add 10, and I end up with 95. Take that 95, add 10, and I end up with 105. Add 10, and I end up with 115. Add 10, and I end up with 125. Add 10, and I end up with 135. So after 6 weeks, you end up with 135. So if it's asking you something like this, where you know you have a pattern moving forward, it's okay to create a grid like this to kind of help you out and figure out how to go about your way. All right, so write your findings as a sequence. Well, up here we had sequences, right? So that was pretty easy. We're just going to do our starting one, and then we have 85, 95, 105, 115, 125, 135. So we used those blocks to figure out what our answer is for the question, and then we were able to actually write the sequence. Okay, so when we have this, each of these numbers in the sequence is called a term, okay, of the sequence. When the numbers of a sequence follow a pattern, we will describe the rule of the pattern. Okay, what rule does the sequence follow? Well, the rule is that you add 10 to previous number, right? So if I started at 75, all I have to do is add 10. If I'm up to, say, 205, all I have to do is I know I add 10. So I get up to 215. All right, let's look at another example. The table shows the area of squares with sides from 1 to 5 units long. The numbers in the area column form the sequence. Use the sequence to answer each question. Okay, so what is the next term of the sequence? Let's take a look at that. If I have a side, I'm in a square, right? My square is going to be the length times width, and a square has the same value. So I'm going to multiply this by itself. So the length times width will give me 1. Okay, that's true. 2 is one side, multiplied by its other side gives me 4. We're good. 3 on one side times 3 on the other side of that square will give me 9. So do you see how each of these, if I multiply it by itself, it equals 25. So, or well, 5 times 5 equals 25. So A says, what is the next term of the sequence? Well, that would be 6 times 6. So I would think that that would be 36. So I'm going to go ahead and put that as my next term of the sequence. Describe the pattern of the sequence. Well, what we're doing is we're multiplying the side by itself. Okay, so if I have 2 on one side, then I'm multiplying it by itself. Because the length of a side, remember that our area equals length times width. So in a square, my length and width are the same. Write an expression that can be used to find the area of a square with side length n units. Well, we know it's the number times itself, so if my side is n, that would be n times n. Or what I could do is I could also call it n squared, because that's what n times n means. Use your expression to find the 20th term of the sequence. Okay, um, the 20th term would be 20 squared, and that's going to give us the number of 20 times 20, which is 400. I could also do 20 times 20, right? It's just a little bit easier. This is, having it squared is a little bit more efficient. Okay? All right. So here what we're going to do is we're going to pause the notes for a moment. In fact, this video is going to end, and you are going to work on some monitoring progress to see if you can go ahead and find the differences. Feel free to go ahead and do what we did up here, where you find the difference between each one to establish the pattern, and then continue on and see how you do. I look forward to seeing how well you do.